CJ Gardner-Johnson, somebody I had to eat some crow on yesterday on the Morning Woodward show, and I know me and Matt Broder have had our battles about a couple of members of the Detroit Lions secondary, but that's all well and good because at the end of the day, the Lions are going to the NFC Championship game, and we have the one, the only Matt Broder here with us to answer some questions about the Detroit Lions. And Broder, before we get into the minutia of the game or the matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers, I just have to ask, put on your fan hat for a second. How great has it been to cover this team, having eight regular season playoff games, 2 home playoff games, getting to be up close and personal, getting to interview the players and get to know them and being a real insider on really the best season the Lions have had in the Super Bowl era? How big of a privilege has that been for you, Broder?
Oh, it's been fantastic. Like I could never have dreamed of a better first season covering this team, not just because of the storylines and the success and the wins, but you look at a lot of these players and especially these coaches led by Dan Campbell. It's just made for such amazing interviews, such amazing press conferences. It's a team that matches this city perfectly. And right when Sam was introducing the team, I know you said, Shep, you were like unbelievable under your breath. To have this happen this year, and you've been around Detroit sports for so long, it's special for so many people. Am I right?
Yeah, because I covered this team when they were 0-16. So I called their preseason games for about 10 years where you just couldn't get a gauge on whether or not they were good. Now you've got an idea of just how good they are and can be. What has surprised you most about how this team has stuck together? And if I had told you before the season began, would you have ever believed they would not lose 2 games in a row?
No, that's the key. And that I think I said this earlier in the season, but it reminds me, Verlander's MVP season, he had, I think 12 or 13 of his wins came after a loss. So he was that stopper. He was that losing streak stopper. The fact that the Lions haven't lost 2 in a row, considering what they've been through, it's incredible. And that just showcases their resilience. I know that's a buzzword that has been used a lot, but it's truly what this team is defined by. You go all the way back. My first memory of it this season, that Green Bay Packers game, I think it was the first drive, Jared Goff threw an interception. They might have given up a field goal, but they got the ball back real quickly, and they were just a light speed after that. They played a great game. They blew out the Packers for the rest of that game. They've done that so many times this year. When you can shut down a losing streak, when you cannot have a losing streak in more than 25 games, you're destined for success, and we're seeing it come to fruition this year.
Isn't that something? They've done something San Francisco has not done. I mean, both teams ended the year 12-5. San Francisco lost back-to-back games. Detroit did not.
3 in a row.
They lost 3 in a row, right. Baltimore did not. Kansas City went through a spell where people started to question the Chiefs a little bit. So I think the Lions are doing something right now that I think other teams in the league have taken notice of and might be a little envious. I've said this. I think this team is built differently than any other team in the playoffs. San Francisco goes as McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel go. When you look at Kansas City, you think immediately of Patrick Mahomes. When you think of Baltimore, Lamar Jackson. Detroit, what do you think of first when you talk about their success this year?
I mean, I think of the offensive line.
Me too.
I think Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker.
Right.
And obviously Jonah Jackson and Graham Glasgow is much apart, but that's the identity to me, Shep.
Agreed. Yeah. That's a good identity.
Yeah. And that's how they've built it. And I know Jared Goff's taken a lot of slack or gets people hedge his success behind the offensive line. But whether it's Jared Goff or another quarterback, that's how Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell want to build this team. And Jared Goff is fantastic at play action. At when he has time, he can pick apart a defense. So he fits perfectly with their identity. However long he ends up as their quarterback, we'll see. But when you're built in the trenches like that, and the defensive line help with Hutch is coming, like that's the very next step for them being elite, and that's what we see over in San Francisco.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's special. And real quick, to go back to the resilience and that topic, in this last game, in the divisional round, their first drive, they had a 3-and-out. And what they do the very next drive, they forced a turnover on the Bucs. Not just a turnover, C.D. Deuce, an interception on Baker Mayfield was huge. And their next 3-and-out, I believe, in the third quarter, they ended up getting a huge stop, a quick 3-and-out on the Bucs after. So it translates to so many parts of this football game. It's so fun to watch every Sunday or Saturday.
Yes, and Broder, speaking of Jared Goff, I got to give you your props because you you have been one of the few people who have been, I would say, confident in him all along. You never wavered when he had some rough performances, and I'll even get on the stand. I wavered a lot, especially after the Chicago Bears game, but the way that he has played in the playoffs, that has been the, I would say, come to Jesus moment for a lot of us people, myself included. So how has it been for you watching him grow into himself and have those great playoff performances, or those very efficient playoff performances that have really been one of the driving forces in the Lions winning these playoff games?
It truly has. I love it, and I feel like I just view the quarterback position maybe a little differently than most, or at least value the accuracy and the ball placement, the pre-snap decision making a little more than some of the statistics that a lot of people look at it. But even if you do look at statistics, he's been one of the top quarterbacks in the league over the last 2 years and is near the top throughout his career. I mean, he's led 2 different franchises back from 10-year droughts out of the playoffs. That's not a mid quarterback. An average quarterback doesn't do that. There's something special about him that maybe doesn't show up in a stat sheet, or you can't see. So to see him come out this season and lead this team, especially late in games in the fourth quarter, Booner, our loyal Booner path, our Booner not follower, the Booner path that Booner talks about. Part of that has to do with closing games out in the fourth quarter. And Jared Goff, since week 10, which includes 3 losses, he's been at the top of the NFL in pass yards per game, completion percentage, pass touchdowns, and passer rating. So when the game's on the line, whether you need to close out a game ahead or make a comeback like in the Bears game, Jared Goff's been that guy to lead the offense.
Yeah, there's too many times I think we look at quarterbacks, and goalies share this too, but we saddle them with losses. And I don't think it's necessarily fair. We're unwillingness to always give them wins, too. He's 66-50-1 all time. That he is just finally getting some recognition that he has deserved far before this season.
I think it might be because he's leading the Detroit Lions to the promised land, we'll say, to the playoffs for the first time, or winning a playoff game for the first time. But, I look at Jared Goff a lot like the difference between a pitcher who can throw 100 miles per hour versus 90 miles per hour. There are advantages to being able to throw so hard, and you have a better opportunity to strike the batter out. But sometimes the guy who throws 90 and gets ground balls and keeps his defense engaged on the baseball field, that adds such a big element to that team and their energy that they play with. They show up to the ballpark or the field every day. I know there's a lot of that from a football sense with this team and Jared Goff, him just being level-headed. They know whether they're Amon-Ra St. Brown or Antoine Green in the wide receiver group, if they're on the field, they might be getting the ball. Jared Goff will find them. He'll make the right reads and the right passes.
I think some of this, too, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, is because of today's day and age of quarterbacks, when you have Lamar Jackson and you have Patrick Mahomes and you have Jordan Love and you have a guy like Josh Allen and you have Jalen Hurts, guys who can get out of the pocket, run for a first down, and look pretty smooth doing it, he is not one of those guys. No. He had that quarterback run up the middle against the Bucs the other day, and people were going crazy because they're not sure they've ever seen him run 8 to 10 yards before, right? I think some of that has something to do with it, too. It's not that he's that smooth operator at the trigger position.
Yeah, Aroldis Chapman or Greg Maddux, they look different, but for a quarterback, to me, wins are so important. There's so many intangibles that go into leading a team to a victory in the NFL. You have 17 games. It's different than the NBA talk where they pick up the defense at the end of the season. However we want to look at that, there's just something special about him leading this Detroit team, and they're just rallying around him and Dan Campbell, and it just fits this city so perfect. And I think not the national media, but national fans, people around the world are starting to see this team as changing how maybe teams are built.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah.
This could be a blueprint for future franchises, don't you think?
Yeah. Every move they make, the majority of the people said it was probably the wrong move. From Dan Campbell, from hiring Dan Campbell before the general manager, making that an arranged marriage, drafting Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, trading out of the 6th pick and to go get Gibbs and not Beach. There's so many things that they've done, a linebacker at 18, that people have said.
Tight end.
Yeah. They're crazy, and I've probably been a part of it too for a lot of the decisions, but they've stuck to their guns, and they've brought in guys, rookies, veterans that fit the mold. They aren't scared of this moment. The playoffs are the playoffs, and now it's a team built. Now it's a team that's getting comfortable winning. They're young guys who all they know is winning because there are rookies who are contributing. Laporta had the most catches. Gibbs had the most rushing yards. Brian Branch had the most tackles in this playoff game. It's been incredible.
Oh, it's been absolutely incredible with how the rookies have stepped up. All the draft picks, all the Brad Holmes draft picks over the last 3 seasons, all the last 3 drafts. The way that they're contributing to this team is just, I mean, it's amazing. They went from 3-13-1 to the NFC Championship game. An absolutely unbelievable turnaround. But
Isn't it refreshing that we
yes.
don't have to sit here and talk about who they should have taken?
Yeah.
How many times in the past have we looked at a draft and said, you know what? They could have had this guy, Dwayne Wade. How many times have we looked at a Lions draft and said, why didn't they take this dude instead of this? You're not doing that with Brad Holmes' drafts.
I will never do that again.
Yes, you will. But no, and that's okay. But the second guessing has been muted. That's the fun thing. What's the next step for us as an industry is to say, I was wrong.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay to say, you know what? I didn't want Jahmyr Gibbs, but I'm glad you did. I was wrong. You were right.
Oh, yes. And I was one of those people that was not super happy with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick.
Because you wanted Jalen Carter?
I did want Jalen Carter at number 6. I didn't want them to trade out. But retrospectively, we should have all just said, Brad Holmes, you know what you're doing, and he made the right pick. I didn't want Jack Campbell at 18, and it happened. I wanted Michael. If I wanted a tight end in the draft, I would have wanted Michael Mayer. Yeah. And I look pretty dumb for that now.
No, he was pretty good. He was pretty good with the Raiders.
I mean, when he was on the field. But he wasn't Sam Laporta. I mean, I think Michael Mayer would have been okay in this Lions offense. But we never have to worry about that because Sam Laporta is
But
there.
99% of analysts said Michael Mayer is the best tight end in the draft. Hands down.
No doubt. Yeah. And by the way, the reason we say we want a guy, and this is not a knock on anybody because I've done it too, is we read what others write. We don't want. You didn't see Sam Laporta play at Iowa much.
Not much, no.
No, not much. So you weren't sitting there going, I got to have that guy. Iowa's a tight end factory. Think about it for a second. There are constantly good players coming out of that position. Do we trust what Kirk Ferentz and company are doing? I suppose. But just because Hawkinson was really good, just because George Kittle was really good, doesn't mean that Sam Laporta is really good. But you said something pretty key there, and that is, look, you're never going to question him again. That's not necessarily true. We should question them. I just think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. That's what general managers build up. They build up the benefit of the doubt, not the full trust where you can never do anything wrong. Right?
Right. And he's making the jobs of Mel Kiper and Todd McShay much harder moving forward. He's going to miss on some draft picks moving forward. It's part of it. But we now have so much faith that the majority of his picks might not just be winners, they might be Pro Bowlers or all pro players like he's already hit on with Penei Sewell on St. Brown. It's special what they're building.
Even Jonah Jackson, that draft pick.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, and Sam Laporta, second-team All-Pro as a rookie, unbelievable. And we talked about the offense. We talked about Jared Goff. I want to discuss the defense a little bit with you, Broder, because I think it's still somewhat polarizing around among Lion fans. You could look at it a couple of different ways because ever since Week 10 in the Los Angeles Chargers, they've given up a lot of huge games to number 1 wide receivers. You think of Keenan Allen, you think of Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. But in those games, they also usually don't let a second receiver go off. They limit the run, and a lot of times they shut down the run. And one of the ways they've been doing that is they create turnovers. Like in the Vikings game, in the 2 Vikings games, they intercepted Nick Mullins a combined 6 times. They forced a couple turnovers against Dallas. They forced a couple turnovers against Tampa Bay, and against the Rams, they were great at red zone defense. Every time the Rams went to the red zone, they settled for a field goal. So my question is this defense good enough to win a Super Bowl, this Lions defense?
I think so. Because to win a Super Bowl, they just need to put 2 games together now. Yep. They need to get a couple takeaways. They're going to give up yards. They're going to give up points to the 49ers and whoever they might end up playing in the Super Bowl. But their blueprint is getting pressure on the quarterback in relatively confusing ways by blitzing defensive backs and safeties, and then taking advantage of that pressure by getting takeaways. So if they can do that once or twice against Brock Purdy and Jared Goff takes care of the ball on offense, they don't have any turnovers. Yeah, you could sneak out of San Francisco with a win and then go try to do it again.
You just said Super Bowl and the Lions in the same sentence. I just can't get over it. Here's my concern, though. I think in order for Detroit to be successful against San Francisco, I don't think you can blitz. I think you've got to have pressure with 4, and that's been their biggest problem. How do you fix that? Who can come in, Houston, and fix that?
That might be the only answer. Otherwise, they've proven they can't win rushing 4. They can't get to the quarterback and make it difficult enough to force mistakes. So we hope Houston, who was healthy all this last week, he was a healthy scratch in this game. If he's as healthy as he should be, or we think if we can get 85% of what we saw at the end of last year, that could be a massive help to Aiden Hutchinson, who we've now seen get home, 8 times in the last 4 games? He's got 8 sacks in the last 4 games. Still getting pressure.
Pressure's right.
Yeah, getting quarterback hits. That makes it so much more difficult on the quarterback and leads to those takeaways in the secondary. So you're right. I don't know if they're strong enough to make it happen this year with that front 7 or even those 3 or 4 defensive linemen, but that is the blueprint. You're right.
San Francisco's linebacking core is as good, I think, as there is in the league. How does Detroit take advantage of their strength against San Francisco's strength?
I think you got to really get into that play action. You got to find a way to play not to just Jared Goff's strengths, but to this team's strengths. If you can establish a run game with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs running in between the tackles, at least early in the game, that will allow whether it's Fred Warner or whoever they have just taking that extra little hesitation to think a run's coming. That's where Jared Goff pulls it back and finds Laporta for a 6-yard gain, a 7-yard gain, St. Brown for a first down, or Reynolds. I think you just got to be yourself. I mean, it's their identity. I think you just got to go play your best game.
Yeah, Broder, do you think, and I want to ask you this because, this is your weekly segment on the show and we're not going to see you again until the game. How do you think the Lions match up with the San Francisco 49ers? Is this a team that the Lions can actually go into their house and beat?
Yes. I truly believe that. I think I would pick their offense. I would take the Lions offense over the 49ers offense.
Even if Deebo Samuel's healthy enough? I mean, it's 50-50. I think he's going to play.
Yeah.
But you would take Detroit's offense over that offense?
I would. I think the offensive line is stronger, and I think there's so much power to having that. And then the rhythm that they play with, or the way Jared Goff is able to distribute the ball to so many different people, you can't take one player out of the game on this defense. You might single out St. Brown, but Laporta is going to go off. He's going to find Reynolds. Khalif Raymond might be back. We're starting to see more of Jahmyr Gibbs in the pass game. I'd take their offense over the 49ers for sure. And it's close. It's not that much of a gap. Yeah. 49ers are great. I would take their defense over the Lions' defense every day also. So that's where I think it's going to come down to 1 or 2 big plays. And I think it's the Lions' defense that needs to make those big plays.
If I gave you key players in a game like this, where does your mind go?
My mind goes to Penei Sewell first. It usually does.
God love you. Me too.
Yeah, it goes to C.D. Deuce, C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
See, mine goes to Taylor Decker second, because you got bookend defensive ends that could cause problems for Detroit off the edge. I don't know how much they move Bosa and Young around. I think what's been good about Detroit to a certain extent is they've been able to put pressure up the middle. I'm a big pressure up the middle guy. You got to get in Brock Purdy's face. If it's from the edge and you allow him to step up, that's a problem. I think you got to bring pressure from inside. But if you look at the two tackles, I think they're so important, because you mentioned that's why it's kind of a setup of a question. What's the identity? You say offensive line. Then you ask, hey, listen, where does your mind go? Key players. You say Sewell right away. That's great stuff. But Christian McCaffrey is going to be an issue, right? So Detroit's run defense has been pretty good. How vital is it to do that and make San Francisco, lack of a better common phrase, one-dimensional than anything else?
I think that's absolutely huge. And Taylor Decker, I think, had his best game of the year last week, or 2 days ago, against the Bucs. He played great, and that allowed Ragnow, Jonah Jackson, and Yodi Awasika and Graham Glasgow to focus on Vita Vea and that pressure up the middle. So Decker's huge. But you're right. I believe 3 or 4 out of the 5 losses for the 49ers, McCaffrey's been under 55 yards rushing per game. So shutting that down is huge. Actually making them one-dimensional, making Brock Purdy beat you is going to be my key to this game. He's young. He can do it. I believe in Brock Purdy, but I also think if you can get him to throw the ball away, maybe an interception or 2, getting to him is the key to this game, making him uncomfortable.
It's interesting, isn't it? He brings up Vita Vea, and his name wasn't broadcast much.
Not really.
Aaron Donald's name was not broadcast much. Those are two elite defensive tackles. I mean, some people would argue Aaron Donald's the greatest defensive lineman in the history of the game. Not me, I'd say Reggie White, but pretty damn close. And he was not mentioned very often during that playoff game. That tells you something about how good the interior part of that offensive line was against the Rams, was against the Bucs, and will have to be against the Niners.
Oh yeah, and you've seen it also with not just with the interior, but with Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker taking some of the best edge rushers out of the game. You've seen it with Daniil Hunter most recently. You saw it with Bosa and Mack in the Los Angeles Chargers game. And honestly, we know how good that Nick Bosa is. He was the Defensive Player of the Year last year. Chase Young is a damn good number 2 defensive end. But at least when it comes to Penei Sewell, I think Penei Sewell can block Nick Bosa. Penei Sewell is the best offensive lineman in the NFL. He's going to step on the same field as Trent Williams and be the better player right now.
Wow.
I really
Trent
truly
Williams
believe
pretty
that.
damn good, man.
No, he is. Trent
good.
Williams is going to walk straight out of the NFL and walk into the Hall of Fame with the gold jacket. But right now, I think Penei Sewell's better. And Taylor Decker, you're right. He played maybe his best game as a Lion against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. And we're going to need more of that.
You guys think Penei Sewell's better than Frank Ragnow at what they do? I think Frank Ragnow is the best. I think he's the best center in football.
He is.
Honestly, I think they're both the best at their positions.
They are.
Wow.
But I might put Penei Sewell as the best overall offensive lineman. I would.
Then why doesn't he play left tackle? Since everybody views that as the best or the most important offensive line position. I'm not one of those people. I'm just saying, why isn't he the left tackle then?
I think it's just for lack of a better term, an embarrassment of riches. You have a very, very, very good left tackle in Taylor Decker. So that was the initial decision to start Penei Sewell at right tackle after they drafted him. There is always the possibility that should Taylor Decker retire or move on at some point, Penei could move over if there's a better right tackle in the draft. Yeah. That's what makes Penei so special. When Taylor Decker missed a game, he did move over to left tackle, so he can do it all.
Oh, yes. Tuesdays with Broder. It never disappoints. Thank you so much for joining us,
of course.
Man. And everybody, if you're not watching Woodward Nights with Booner and Broder, then what are you doing? Tune in tonight from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time and every single weekday, Monday through Friday. Thank you again for joining us. We will be right back. And coming up next, we're going to get into the San Francisco matchup a little bit because you know what? After a while, you have to turn the page. We're still high off of that Kool-Aid, but you got to turn the page because job is not finished. But first, I have to tell you about Premier Pet Supply.